everyone, I'm an astronaut today, and where's Lucy? Let's give she a big surprise. Hi!
Hello.
So funny today.
Wow, we have an astronaut in our studio today. Who is this? Oh, hello. Yeah. Wow. Where did you get that? It's so cool.
From Taobao.
Oh, from Taobao.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I'll go and look for such a spacesuit. The Chinese flag. It's cool. Is it too hot? Is it too hot in there?
Yeah, very hot. Actually.
Okay.
Today I want to tell you some fun facts.
Okay. Yeah, let me try. I'm horrible in science, but let me try.
Okay. Why the astronauts will be taller
in space?
In our space.
Okay, let's see this question. I know this. I happen to know this.
Oh, nothing.
Why astronauts? But what is the prize if I get it right? Okay, why will astronauts be taller in aerospace, in outer space? Because there is no gravity.
Yeah.
There is nothing to pull you down, so you become longer.
Oh.
And likewise, you don't have wrinkles anymore. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's the right answer.
That's the correct answer?
Yeah,
good. Thank you. You were soft on me. That was not a tough one.
But I only have the one question.
You only have one question? Okay,
yeah.
Good. Because of, there will be loose gravity, so the spine will be extended more so that the height looks taller than before. But here's one more. But when they return to Earth, they will immediately return to the real height. You know what? I know one thing you can do. You can do yoga. It will extend your spine. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Try to do yoga in space. What an experience will that be?
I don't know.
You don't know. Well, we can imagine. Yeah. Okay.
And another. Can you sign your name on my bag or clothes?
Oh my God, this is exciting. Can I sign on the helmet?
Okay.
Wow, who's gonna get it? Oh, look at this. This is so cool. This feels very cool.
Ooh, yay.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's an honor.
Thank you. That's your time.
All right.
I will see you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's so sweet. Good talk to you. Yeah. Welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. In this series, I dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join me in real time by sending me your comments or questions via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN application, email me at thepointwithlx@cgtn.com. Let me know what you think. We air Headline Buster on Fridays at 11 a.m. Beijing time, so get in touch and we might read out your comments. Speaking of which, let's take a look at some comments from social media on today's topic, China's space program. From Chris Paul, having numerous spacefaring nations is not a bad thing. It is a sad distortion of nationalism that makes this positive momentum toward a second space station feel like a loss. From Ben, the International Space Station is the finest example of international collaboration, but China has never been allowed to join. China launched its own space station today. This is the definition of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Wade Wang says space exploration is a matter for all mankind. Outside the Earth, all countries have a common name, that is the Earth. All countries deserve to be congratulated for their success in every small step in space exploration. Well, thank you for all your comments. Please keep them coming through the show, and we'll try to bring them up in the discussion part. Today, as the comments suggest, we are bringing you to outer space and talking about China's plans to build a space station. How are those plans depicted in the media? As one more exciting leap for mankind, or as another cause for concern or threat from China? Before we look at our examples, a bit of background. China successfully launched the core module of a new space station on April the 29th. It was the first of 11 planned missions to deliver astronauts, supplies, and laboratory modules to build what will become China's first low Earth orbital space station called Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace, before the end of 2022. Now, the core module, called Tianhe, meaning heavenly harmony, was blasted into space by a Long March carrier rocket launched from South China's Hainan province. Tianhe will be at the center of the T-shaped space station, acting as the command center and living space for astronauts. On either side of Tianhe, there will be two lab capsules, namely Wentian and Mengtian. The space station will be able to support up to 6 astronauts at once. Now, the European Space Agency sent a message on its Twitter account to congratulate China. Building the space station is one of China's most complicated space missions so far. Last month's launch also marks the beginning of the third phase of China's manned space program, which was approved by the government in 1992. The first phase was to send astronauts into space and return them safely. The second phase was to test key technologies such as space rendezvous and docking through the launch of a space lab. And the third phase, to assemble and operate a permanently crewed space station. And those are just a few of China's recent space endeavors. Last December, China's Chang'e 5 mission returned samples from the moon's surface, making China the third country after the US and the former Soviet Union to do so. So what will China's new space station be used for? Hao Chun, director of the China Manned Space Agency, said in a recent interview, "We are willing to work with any space institutes that are peace-loving and devoted to the peaceful use of space." Mind the word any. He also added that there will be foreign astronauts participating in China's manned space flight and working and staying in China's space station. Many of them have been learning Chinese for this purpose. Cooperation in regard to Tianhe has already been well underway. China has cooperated with the United Nations, among others, for instance, to select science experiments from around the world to be carried out on board its new space station. By the end of 2020, a total of 9 projects had been selected for the first cycle of cooperation. They involved 23 institutions from 17 countries, including both developing and developed ones such as Germany, Switzerland, Poland, India, Japan, and Peru. It's worth noting that China does not exclude any country from cooperation in space exploration. When China's first Mars mission Tianwen-1 was launched last July, a foreign ministry spokesperson made it clear that China stands ready to work with other countries on the basis of mutual respect, openness and inclusiveness, equality, and mutual benefit. And now China is determined to build a space station that's open to all. It's a story about innovation, cooperation, and what humans are capable of achieving in outer space. And now, what's the impression you get when you read about the story in the international media? Let's take a look at a few examples. My first example comes from CNN, which published an article called "China Successfully Launches First Module of Planned Space Station." The headline is neutral, but the opening and the overall structure indicate that when it comes to space, it seems to be China versus international cooperation. The article opens with concerns over the future of international cooperation by saying, for more than 2 decades, the International Space Station has orbited 227 nautical miles above Earth, with more than 200 astronauts from 19 different countries enjoying stints aboard. The article adds, but its role as the sole venue for a continuous human presence in space, scientific research, and a testing ground for future space exploration is coming to a close, potentially signaling an end to an unparalleled era of international cooperation in space. Now, the International Space Station, of course, or ISS, is the only space station currently in orbit and consists of cooperation between the US, Russia, Canada, Japan, and the member states of the European Space Agency. China is de facto excluded from the ISS by a US law enacted in 2011 forbidding the NASA to cooperate with Chinese scientists working for government-funded entities. The unparalleled era of international cooperation on board the ISS has not been so great for China. Regardless, why would international cooperation have to end for anyone? Why couldn't it continue with China's space station? China has been cooperating with international counterparts all along in its space programs. So don't worry, international cooperation in space won't be ending. Now, if you take a step back and scan other recent coverage on China's space program, it often seems to pose a threat akin to the space race, or worse. Here's one typical example about China and Russia planning to jointly build an international scientific research station on or around the moon. The New York Times in March published an article about the memo the two sides signed about the plan, titled, "China and Russia Agree to Explore the Moon Together." Sounds straightforward enough, but then in the very first paragraph, the article says the plan sets the stage for a new space race. But is space race an accurate comparison in this situation? What has been called the space race was part of the Cold War rivalry between the US and former Soviet Union starting in the 1950s, and the race refers to the competition to achieve superior space flight capability. So this term has a negative connotation. In China's case, as I said before, it doesn't really have a choice but to build one. But China doesn't see it as a Cold War-style rivalry. China basically has all along rejected the idea of Cold War mentality and Cold War-style policies. In terms of size, China's space station will be a quarter of that of the International Space Station. How can you call it a race when there's such a difference in size and capacity? On top of that, China has been cooperating and pledged to continue to do so in the areas of space, life science, biotechnology, and astronomy, and so on. Basically, China's international cooperation in space is going well, except with the United States. Regardless, the New York Times article clings to this Cold War mindset, asserting that although China pledged to keep the joint project with Russia open to all interested countries and international partners, it seemed all but certain to exclude the United States and its allies in space exploration. What makes the journalists so sure that the US and its allies would be shut out? They seem to project their own thinking onto China and others. And the New York Times is not alone. Many media published opinion pieces using the same space race analogy. Newsweek had a piece titled China, Russia and America, a Cold War in Cold Space. A piece from The Hill asks, will Biden's NASA win the space race with China? Bloomberg also published 3 opinion pieces sounding an alarm about China-Russia cooperation in space. But that's not the whole story. Time, on April the 15th, published an article titled, Why the US and China Should Collaborate in Space. I think that's an interesting one to recommend. It says Sino-American space cooperation could improve ties as it did for the US and Russia, although the article compares China-Russia cooperation as an emerging Sino-Russian axis in space and sees US collaboration with China as a potential bargaining chip to help sustain other areas of cooperation. The author does advocate cooperation, which is always a good thing. The article even gave specific proposals, such as China creating a data share program for their Earth imaging systems. To put it all in perspective, the article says, for decades, space travel has provided an opportunity for humans to see our world differently. Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins said, the thing that really surprised me was that the Earth projected an air of fragility. Chinese astronauts, since Yang Liwei's first flight 18 years ago, have surely had a similar experience gazing down at our planet. I tend to agree. We share this fragile planet. The US and China should collaborate in space and whichever other areas where it's beneficial and necessary, despite legal or political obstacles, because everybody will stand to benefit. What do you think? Send us your comments, and when we come back, I'll talk to my guests about China's ambitions, if we're really in a new space race, and how to promote international cooperation in space, and maybe read out your comments too.
Plans for a Chinese-made space station began about 3 decades ago, when China introduced its three-step strategy for a manned space program. The first step was to get Chinese astronauts into space. On the eve of the new millennium, China successfully launched its first unmanned spacecraft, the Shenzhou-1. 3 more unmanned spaceships were sent into orbit in 2001 and 2002 in preparation for a manned spacecraft. In 2003, for the first time, China sent its astronaut Yang Liwei into space aboard the Shenzhou-5. The second step of China's plan focused on key technology, with breakthroughs achieved for extravehicular activity. A rendezvous docking mission of a manned spacecraft was also completed. In 2008, the country's third manned rocket, the Shenzhou-7, witnessed the astronaut Zhai Zhigong perform China's first spacewalk. So far, China has sent 11 astronauts on 14 spaceflights, all of whom have safely returned to Earth. In 2011, the Tiangong-1, China's first space lab, was launched for docking and orbit experiments. The success of the Tiangong-1 and Tiangong-2 missions marked China's ability to ensure short-term human activity in space. In 2017, China launched its first cargo spacecraft, the Tianzhou-1, equipped with refueling capabilities in space. The nation has successfully completed all tasks in the first and second steps of its manned space project. In May 2020, a Long March 5B rocket launched a prototype manned spacecraft. This cleared the path for the third step of China's program, to assemble and operate its own space station. To achieve that, China is planning 11 major launches of modules, cargoes, and manned spacecraft from 2021 to 2022. The ultimate goal of the final step is to build a space station of international advanced level to carry out long-term scientific and technological experiments in orbit and continue to explore and utilize space resources.
Welcome back to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. Let's get into our panel discussion, and I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Mr. Yang Yuguang. He's professor with China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation. From Washington, D.C. by Amitabh Ghosh, chair of Science Operations Group of NASA Mars Exploration Rover Mission, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Strategies, joining us from Philadelphia. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Mr. Yang, let me go to you first, because this is a China story. Help us understand exactly why does China see it necessary to build its own space station?
Well, you see, China started its space activities in 1950s, last century. But you know that we launched a lot of satellites and start our manned space program in 1992. So you see that to start a manned space program, not only to master the technology, but we want returns from these activities. So you see that a permanent residence of human in space, we can have the chance to have more experiments in space and also developing new technologies for engineering research. So to build a permanent space station in low Earth orbit is very necessary for a big country like China to develop not only develop its high technologies, but to have experiments in the microgravity field and in the under the space radiation. It is very helpful for us for the development of the not only science but also for the national economy. So you see, although it do not have direct returns in most cases for the national economy, but the indirect returns is very remarkable. It's so that's the reason we should build our space station.
Mr. Gosh, from a scientific point of view, and especially from the Mars rover project, how do you see China's endeavor, especially the blasting off of the Tianhe core module? Do you see it as something to worry about, or do you see it as another exciting idea so that you can have, more possibilities and potentially collaboration and potentially, discoveries that U.S. or other international scientists can also use?
So thank you for that question. So I'll take a shot at it. This is my personal opinion, doesn't have anything legal or something related to the government opinion. But here is what I feel. I think China's journey has been really historic. If you look at the Chang'e set of missions, which have gone from landing on the moon to walking on the, driving on the dark side of the moon to getting a sample back after 50 years from the moon. And so I think it's all very good. One really strategic thing that you have to understand. So we're talking international collaboration, right? So part is governed by geopolitics. Okay, and geopolitics is very hard to predict as to when it will change or what will happen in the future or how will it change. The other thing that you can actually control is you collaborate when there is a mutual interest from both parties. And what NASA does, a lot of it is human spaceflight, if you see. So if you understand, NASA is still ahead of China in human spaceflight. So if it wanted to collaborate, it would be difficult. So I think one of the reasons is perhaps both space agencies are at different developmental stages. So a natural alignment of strategic interests. So if NASA wanted to go to the moon to set up a lunar base, then China wants to set up a space station. So you see, there is not a common project that can be a subject of cooperation here. So and I would really not get too much into the details of how CNN portrayed it, but because maybe it does not, portray the views of the decision makers. So there are different media portraying as space race and not space race. So I wouldn't get too much into it. It's important to know that China is doing very well, and that's a non-negotiable fact. So
I see. Brandon, now you coming from a political analysis point of view and coming from maybe more a geopolitical analysis point of view, do you think it has been hyped, this idea of a space race? Look, as Mr. Gosh was pointing out, the United States is ahead of China in terms of space exploration. Are we really talking about something like a race, a rivalry, that is qualified?
I think we need to understand that the term space race and when it's being used by media means a wide range of things. There are some media that are going for the negative connotations of it and things like that and inviting the Cold War very heavily in the comparison. But I actually think that the space race phrase is actually a positive one. Even in historical context, the space race is one of the few even remotely positive things that came out of the Cold War. The 1975 handshake by a cosmonaut and an American astronaut in space was watched by the world. It was celebrated by the world. It laid the foundation in the 80s at really the height of the Cold War for NASA and the Soviet Union to cooperate in the early stages of what led to the International Space Station. I mean, these are massive technological advances that were built through competition that was eventually found ways to collaborate during. Where I think there's been a mistake is that the United States in 2011 decided that the road to collaboration just wasn't the future of space exploration. Many of its partners, from Russia to European partners, have complained about the US pulling back from collaboration rather than finding ways to enjoy competition and engaging with each other, is to realize that this is a race we are all running into a much more exciting future. And sometimes it's going to be competitive, but if we can keep it positively competitive, then we're going to end up getting there faster with better technology, with better options.
Well, yeah, from China's perspective, Mr. Yang, does China see it from a positively constructive perspective, or does China feel that, the threat, the potential threat, or China's ambition has been overly exaggerated and, often looked through a political prism?
Well, you see, Brandon and I have different definition of view of the competition or a race. You see that a race or competition is not only concerned with what you should do, but also concerned with when you should do it. You see that during the space race between US and the former Union, they almost launch spacecraft or spaceship every month or even or every 2 months. So very frequently. So that is a race because they want to be the first. But now you see that China, although we have a very ambitious space program, but we do it very, very slowly. So we only launch a spacecraft or 2 every year or even every 2 years. So you see that this shows that this is a very strong evidence that we only developed these kind of space program or space schemes according to our own. You see that China is developing country, but also a very big country, especially a big country in space field. So you see that the decision makers think that it is right for China to develop this kind of space program, but not to compete or have a race with other countries. Of course, in commercial field, they do have competition. But you see that this kind of competition, as Brenda have mentioned, the competition is good for such as the improve the efficiency or to have the innovation for new technologies. But you see, in commercial field, the competition or race is not a race between different countries, but between different companies. So you see, even in China, there are very intensive competition between different such satellite makers or rocket makers. But you see, this not we cannot see this in the manned space field. You see that in manned space activities, they do have race during the Cold War, but the things has already changed.
Okay.
Any space
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Yang, I get your point. I think our guests get your point. Mr. Gosh, what is your definition or perception of the word, of the term space race? Do you think it is proper to be used here?
I don't think it is proper. I do agree with Dr. Yang's perspective here. And I'll tell you why. As a scientist, I see more cooperation than competition. So each of the NASA projects have multiple partners, European partners, and the different partners that we work with. Same with China. China has many international collaborators in this space, in your space station. So from my perch, I see more cooperation. But if I go to the media, suddenly there is a space race. So as I think Dr. Yang pointed out, so imagine today a person who is making plans. So all these things take tens of years to plan. 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So somebody who's planning what NASA is going to do in 2031 is not looking at newspaper reports to determine what China should be doing. And same with NASA. So they are going their own way. And it's not like they're trying to compete for similar goalposts. They're not trying to do that same exact thing. And even if they're going to Mars is a big planet. The surface area of Mars is equal to the surface area of Earth. So I think the term space race here is not quite appropriate.
I see. I hope and I believe that most policymakers don't base their policies on everyday news reports. Unfortunately, public opinion can be swayed, right? Public sentiments can be guided by these reports. Brandon, you probably see it as a rather fun term, let's put it this way. But can you deny that maybe there is a certain level of hostility based on the already unfavorable public opinion of China right now to talk about China's space program in such a way? Or it's inevitable that because of the political environment that, they have to kind of portray China's space program in such a, competitive light?
Well, I think a couple of different pieces in there. One, the reaction to China's early forays into space, I think, is in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, I was in China for many of the early launches with Tiangong. I was on TV about them. I was very excited, but I know that many of my American colleagues and many politicians in the United States treat space a bit arrogantly. You know, they don't like seeing a spacecraft without an American flag on it, right? There's an ego element to it,
Okay.
and then it translates to whatever
They'll
their
get used
other.
to it.
Yeah, and they should, and they absolutely should. I'm just saying that, but like, it's all in the eye of the beholder in that sense. You know, somebody that is upset that somebody else is doing well is just the same kind of person that can't handle their neighbor having a nice looking lawn, right? They're just upset that somebody else is having a good day. My theory is, when it comes to science, the scientists want to collaborate. I'm on a great panel here with two great scientists who are way smarter than I am, and I'm hearing that they want to collaborate. They don't want to race. They want to make this work for everyone, and I agree with that. But I do think, from a political perspective, that there can be some benefit. There could be some esprit de corps. While we hope that policymakers aren't reading the headlines and making decisions moment to moment, we do have to agree that if somebody at NASA is going to be planning 2031, that means that somebody in 2020 has to allocate $1 billion for that planning to even begin in the early stages. So you have to have public opinion. You have to have a sense of purpose and goals. And if you looked at the early 21st century, a lot of people said, where were the goals with American space exploration? And money got diverted to other areas. NASA got diverted to other areas. Many of its technological advances got focused in other areas, which are very useful, but not space exploration. We're finally seeing a return to that. The call to go to Mars, the idea of lunar bases. These are all good things, and we need to challenge each other while still keeping collaboration at the forefront. We need to challenge each other with these ideas and say, hey, we're going to do this by 2035. What are you going to do? And then watching space agencies and governments say, you know what, we're going to put some money behind this because this is the future of the human race, to continue our development on a course of exploration.
Well, hopefully so, you know, to put money into R&D, to put money into the long-term exploration of the outer space is a good thing for mankind. So if that is but if you are thinking about making more laws to make it difficult for China to advance in this space program or whatever project, I think that is not a very nice thing to plan. And you are going to make the Chinese want to develop their own technology and their own program even more, right? We have a comment coming in, and let's take a look at that comment to see what it says. And here we have it. It's from Rajat Rasul. The station will open ways for those whom are considered as hostile or abandoned by the US and its allies. It is going to decrease states' dependency on US for space exploration. So 2 points here. First of all, whether there is a kind of dependency that is being exploited by the United States and its allies in the current ISS or International Space Station endeavor. And secondly, whether China has this idea in mind, you know, when it develops its own space station. I want to go to Mr. Ghosh first and then to Mr. Yang.
Right. So I think this is absolutely a misperception. If you look at the US, what is it doing? It is outsourcing a lot of the space stuff to SpaceX and Blue Origin. So it does not have its own capability. So the thing that somehow the US is kind of holding back capability and controlling capability, so they are actually letting go. They're telling the private sector here that, well, so the next step, you saw SpaceX launching to the space station. The next step is they're going to just pay some private companies to buy some data from the moon. So that private company will go launch a rocket, land on the moon, collect the experiments. What the US government wants is just data. So somehow this perception that the US is trying to control access to space or technology is, I don't know, is far from the truth. And quick point about this perception of, I think, Mr. Brandon mentioned that a section of the people in the US are disgruntled that China is doing this, that, and the other. I think there are many landings which happened, and I think there's an overwhelming positive feeling, certainly among scientists who will get more data. And I think the general public, you know, I think this cause of science is being furthered. If China's or India's rover were to discover life on Mars, do you think everybody in the world is going to get angry and say, well, we are not going to accept the result? Of course not.
Mr. Yang, your answers to this question, please.
Well, I would rather call it multiple choices. You know that several years before, professor from Beijing Institute of Technology, Professor Deng Yulin, has brought his scientific instruments to the international space with the help of NanoRacks, an American company. So you see that now, not only Beijing Institute of Technology, but other universities in other countries has a choice to utilize China's space station. So I think it is a responsibility of a space capable nation to bring chance for other countries to have experiment in space.
Will there be a fault line along geopolitical sense in the space station? I mean, U.S. and its allies primarily choosing the U.S. Platforms, and China and the other countries, possibly its closer friends, choosing the Chinese platform. Mr. Yang.
Well, I think that I think there is no differences. You see that. As I mentioned, the scientists from China has already also delivered applications to with the help of an American company. But also you see that with the help of UN, there is no difference for which country can raise this kind of proposal to have this kind of scientific research work on China's space station.
Okay, Brandon, you're quick-minded and you are very creative. If you are going to be coming up with a term, what alternative would you use instead of space race? Because space race does have a Cold War connotation to it, although you might like it. It does conjure some kind of negative sentiment in people's mind. Is there any other choice you can come up with for the moment?
For the moment, the best one I've read, which I don't think is great, is constructive competition. I think it has a nice alliteration, but it still has the word competition in it. I think that there's got to be a better phrase for it.
Okay.
But the reality is that people can find a cause by joining into the idea that we are improving each other. Now, what I do think is important though is as we look at China's role in all of this, we're seeing fault lines form, I think in part, and I'm speaking from a political perspective, that the United States has made this problem itself. We haven't really spent much time talking about the Wolf Amendment that effectively means that the United States really cannot directly cooperate with China on space exploration. This amendment has led to a situation where Russia is basically saying, like, look, we want to cooperate with the United States and we want to cooperate with China. So we're going to sign separate agreements and never the twain shall meet because our U.S. partners can't work with China because they just can't do it. And I think we're going to see, hopefully not political fault lines form around that, but we're going to see some bifurcation in exploration a little bit around that rather than be hand in hand.
Okay, Mr. Ghosh.
So I have a quick question to make. I think the term space race is completely irrelevant now. Right now the race is with the private sector. If SpaceX can deliver a flight to Mars at 1,000th of the cost, I think all nations will go to that. Any nation will go to that. So the Wolf Amendment is, it monitors collaboration between NASA and China. So the star of the show here is SpaceX. SpaceX and the private sector is going to completely redefine. If you were watching the news, the SpaceX Starship, it landed safely yesterday. This is what's going to carry human astronauts to the moon. It's going to completely change the cost structure. So the race would be between the private sector and the government sector. So I think we are looking at a very different era going forward. I mean, all this we are thinking about is going to be not relevant.
But you see, you don't see many of those stories, at least our researchers haven't seen many of those stories talking about the race between the public sector and the private sector in the space arena. It's not a sexy story for, the politically minded media sector, probably, I don't know. They're all talking about the space race, especially when China and Russia teamed up. Finally, one question from Ghosh, as you really are working on this Mars mission. You said, of course, China and the United States are in different phase of their space program. But is there any potential area where the United States could also use some data that, or some facilities that China may have put in place already?
Absolutely. And that depends on the individual researcher level. So what we don't know is a lot of the data from NASA missions, and I don't know about Chinese missions, are freely available to the internet to anybody in the world. And so you can go to the website and just download the data and look at what experiments yielded whatever data. So yes, but there can be collaboration, but as Brandon mentioned, there is the wolf act. So you have to make sure that you are in compliance. You're not doing anything against the wolf act, which is understandable. So the answer is, it's very, very tough to say.
Okay. Well, we are going to keep it there. Fascinating discussion. I thank you to my guests for your wonderful insights and your time set aside for the discussion. I have been talking to Mr. Yang Yuguang from China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, Mr. Amitabh Ghosh, Chair of Science Operations Group of NASA Mars Exploration Rover Mission, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, President of Grasshopper Strategies. And many thanks to our viewers for having followed us on this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Keep the comments coming. I'll see you on the next edition of HMB.
Thank you.
Comments? Okay, next live stream, please. Someone already looking forward to the next live stream, which is good news. All right, love it when Modi boasted about donating to Afghanistan. Okay, let's not talk about anything else that's not relevant here. Danny Ferguson said, I like these guests. Thank you, me too. Jonathan Bethune says, be nice to each other. I agree. Hit the like button, someone says. I missed the name. We have quite some people watching us at this moment. Danny Ferguson, show over. Well, we're talking about the Q&A. We try to see what people has said about it. From Zhang Fengfeng, now China is never intended to be space giant, but we definitely, as Chinese, I want to be excellent space collaboration with all countries. I believe that's the sentiment, that's the message. Put aside political differences, I agree. Awesome Liu Xin from Comrade UWU, something like that. Thank you very much. Like the stream, Excel Gaming, like the stream. Me, I enjoy too. China on Mars first, think sees. Who is on Mars first? I don't think it was China. I don't have the answer. Valong Liu, China is the future. Well, I would say collectively we are the future, right? China alone, we can't make it, we can't do everything, and we can't exist on our own. Sorry, do not expect Liu Xin to read the comments. Han Suri, we do that every time. Yeah. Namaste from Nepal. We love China. Thank you. Namaste from Beijing. I'm a yogi. Love you, China, from Valerie C. Thank you. Who is the studio astronaut? They're talking about who is the studio astronaut? Yeah, can we cut away to the studio astronaut once again? You be an icon. It's a colleague of mine. She's so sweet. She's in this suit and it's kind of hot today.
So hot.
It's hot?
Yeah.
It is. Looking forward, Nubu says, looking forward to May landing in Mars. I'm also looking forward to that. That would be a great story. From see you soon in Beijing, okay? from Iris saying thank you to me, thank you back. All right, so many comments. I can't keep up with it. They keep going up like that because everybody is trying to say something. All right, all the very best. Space program, interesting topic, but you know, on Earth on a daily basis, let's be safe, happy, and healthy. Okay, see you next week. Bye-bye.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, you want to take off your helmet? Or you want to keep it a mystery? Shit, this is beautiful.
Hi.
Yeah.
So cool. Bye-bye.